He had fired people for less than a fingerprint out of place. But when his new maid broke his biggest rule bringing children into his mansion, he didn't shout. He didn't even move. He just stood there, staring at the two little boys playing on his marble floor. The man everyone called cold and heartless did something no one expected that day. And what he did next shocked everyone who ever worked for him. Earlier that morning, the alarm on Sandra's old phone buzzed at 5:30. She opened her eyes to the cracked ceiling of Pinewood Apartments, a place that smelled of damp walls and boiled rice from the neighbor's room. Her back ached from sleep, but she sat up quickly. Another day. Another chance to keep the roof over her twins. She reached for her phone again. A new message blinked across the screen, and GT Daycare closed today. Emergency. Sorry for the inconvenience. Her fingers froze. The word inconvenience felt like a cruel joke. 2-year-old Ethan and Noah still slept on the thin mattress beside her, their small hands clutching the same toy truck. They had no one else. Their father, David, had been gone 2 years, killed by a drunk driver on his way home from work. Since that night, Sandra had carried everything alone rent: diapers, food, and a heart that never seemed to rest. She rubbed her eyes, fighting tears. The daycare lady had warned her before. I can't always watch them if something happens. And something had happened. Her shift at Backwoods Mansion started in 90 minutes. Her boss, James Backwoods, was not a man who forgave mistakes. He was known across town for his temper and for the rule every worker repeated like a prayer, and GT no children inside the mansion, ever. Sandra stared at her boys. What could she do? Leave them alone? Impossible, she whispered, more to herself than to them. Mama doesn't have a choice today. She bathed them in the small plastic tub, dressed them in clean shirts, and packed bottles, snacks, and a blanket inside an old diaper bag with a broken zipper. Then she buttoned her own blouse, the same plain white one she wore every day, and tied her hair into a bun. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed a tired woman, but also a fighter. Outside, the early sky was pale gray. A cab stopped at the curb. The driver looked at her through the mirror. Backwoods Mansion, right? She nodded, hugging the boys close. The ride felt longer than usual. Through the window, she watched the city change from small shops to wide gates lined with trees. When the cab passed through the iron entrance of the mansion, her stomach tightened. The place looked more like a palace than a home. Endless glass windows, tall pillars, and a silence that seemed alive. She paid the driver with the last crumpled bills in her purse and stepped out, pushing the stroller toward the back service door. Her shoes made soft sounds against the marble steps. Inside, she moved quickly through the servants' corridor, praying no one would notice. In the laundry room, far from the main halls, she spread a small blanket on the floor and set the twins down. Stay here, okay? Watch cartoons for Mama. She opened her phone, played a soft show, and kissed each forehead. Ethan giggled. Noah clapped at the moving colors on the screen. Sandra smiled weakly. Then she grabbed her cleaning cart and hurried toward the grand staircase. Inside the mansion, everything gleamed. The air smelled of polish and flowers. Sandra dusted each banister twice, lined up the pillows on the living room couch, and straightened every silver frame on the walls. She worked fast, but quiet, stopping every few minutes to listen. When she heard laughter echo from the laundry room, her heart raced. She ran back once, checked, and whispered, "Shh, please be good for Mama." They nodded, little heads full of innocence. By the time the tall clock struck 8, The mansion felt still again. James Backwoods was supposed to be at his office downtown at Backwoods Tower. She exhaled, believing she would survive this one risky day. Then she heard the sound of the front door opening. Heavy footsteps followed. Her body froze. It couldn't be him. He never came back this early. The footsteps drew closer, firm against the marble floor. Sandra's throat went dry. She left the mop where it was and turned the corner toward the living room. There he was, James Backwoods tall, in a dark suit, face unreadable, a man carved from order itself. He set his briefcase down, and for a second, the only sound was the tick of the clock. Then another sound broke it, a small laugh. A tiny hand slapped the marble. Sandra's eyes widened. Ethan had pushed the baby gate aside. Both twins crawled into the open living room, pots and lids clanging around them like drums. They laughed louder. James looked down. His jaw tightened. Sandra's world spun. She imagined the words before he spoke them. "You're fired." She stepped forward fast, voice shaking. "Sir, please. I can explain." But before she could reach them, Ethan dropped his lid and crawled to the man's shiny shoes. He looked up, eyes bright, and lifted both arms. "Da," he said. Time stopped. Sandra felt her knees weaken. James blinked, stunned. The expression on his face changed: confusion, maybe pain, maybe something else. Instead of pushing the child away, he crouched down slowly. He let the little boy grab his finger. And then, out of nowhere, he laughed. Not the polite laugh people fake at parties. A real one, soft, unsure, but real. Sandra stood frozen, hand over her mouth. The man who hated noise was sitting on his own floor, letting her son play with his tie. She didn't understand what she was seeing. The house that was always silent now carried a sound it had never known before: the laughter of a child and the quiet breath of a man remembering what it felt like to be alive. The next morning, Sandra still couldn't believe what she had seen. She had left the Backwoods mansion the evening before with her twins asleep in the stroller, but the picture of that moment stayed clear in her mind. James Backwoods, the man known for silence, had been on the floor, letting her son tug at his finger like an ordinary father. She kept asking herself, why didn't he get angry? Maybe it was just shock. Maybe he would fire her today. When she reached the mansion's back gate, her stomach twisted. She walked inside, pushing the stroller, her eyes on the ground. Everything looked normal: the same clean hallways, the same air of order, but she could feel something had changed. James stood near the large window with a cup of coffee. Sunlight poured across the marble floor, soft and gold. He looked up when she entered. For a moment, their eyes met. He didn't frown. He didn't even look angry. He simply nodded once, then turned back toward the window. Sandra lowered her head. "Good morning, sir." He didn't answer, but the nod was enough. It meant she still had a job. She started cleaning, like always, dusting the shelves, wiping the tables, polishing the vases. But she noticed small things were different now. The twins' laughter didn't seem to bother him anymore. When they crawled near the kitchen door later that day, he didn't call for silence. He just stood watching, quiet, but not cold. By the third day, he began to linger around the kitchen more often. Sometimes, when she warmed milk for the boys, he would walk in without a word and pour himself another cup of coffee. The silence between them was no longer heavy, it was soft, like two people who understood pain without having to speak about it. That night, both twins started crying. They were teething again. Their gums were swollen, and no song or toy could calm them. Sandra walked into the kitchen, wearing her old robe, hair tied back loosely. She poured milk into small bottles and tried not to cry from exhaustion. When she turned, James was there leaning against the counter in his shirt sleeves, watching her. She gasped, startled. "Oh, sir, I'm sorry. I'll keep them quiet. I know you need rest." He raised a hand slowly. "You don't have to explain." The calm in his voice surprised her. It was the first time she had heard him speak without the edge of command. For a long moment, they said nothing. The only sound was Noah's soft whimper against her shoulder. Then, quietly, James asked, "How long has it been since their father passed?" Sandra hesitated. Her eyes stung. 2 years, she said softly. "Car accident. He was coming home from work." She bit her lip, blinking fast. "We were supposed to celebrate his promotion that night. He never made it." James looked down at his cup. "I'm sorry." His voice carried something she hadn't expected: pain. After a pause, he spoke again. "I was engaged once. She left when things got hard. Said I wasn't built for love." Sandra didn't know what to say. She rocked Noah gently, humming an old lullaby. To her surprise, James didn't leave. He pulled a chair out and sat down at the kitchen table, silent, thoughtful. They shared the quiet, not as boss and maid, but as two people who knew loss. When Ethan finally fell asleep, she whispered, "Thank you, sir, for not shouting that day. I know I broke your rule." James looked at her with a faint, tired smile. "Rules are easy," he said. "Understanding is harder." That was the night something shifted between them. Not love yet, not even friendship, just the beginning of understanding. The days that followed carried a strange peace. Sandra still cleaned, still cooked, still followed the routine. But the mansion didn't feel as cold anymore. Sometimes she heard music playing from the living room speaker's soft piano notes, filling the space that once held only silence. Sometimes James would stop by the nursery room she had set up in the laundry area and ask simple questions. Do they eat well? Do they sleep through the night? It wasn't small talk. It was care, though he didn't know how to show it. The staff began whispering. They had never seen the boss stay home so often. They noticed how he sometimes smiled when the twins giggled. And soon the whispers changed direction whispers that made Sandra's hands shake when she worked. "She's special to him," one maid said near the corridor. "Watch, he'll make her forget her place," another replied. Sandra pretended not to hear, but their words stung. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted peace. A week later, trouble came wearing perfume and diamonds. Clara Mason, James's ex-fiancée, arrived at the mansion in a black car that gleamed like oil under the sun. Her heels clicked loudly on the marble steps. The staff froze. Some bowed their heads. James met her in the grand hall. Sandra saw them from afar, two figures who once belonged to the same world. Clara smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She stayed close to him all evening, whispering and laughing. Sandra tried to focus on her chores, but she could feel Clara's gaze on her. Later that night, while Sandra arranged glasses in the pantry, Clara walked in, perfume heavy in the air. She looked around, her eyes landing on the folded stroller in the corner. "So," Clara said softly, "you're the one they're talking about." Sandra frowned. "Excuse me?" "The maid," Clara continued, her voice sweet but sharp. "With baggage. 2 pieces of it, actually." Her eyes flicked toward the stroller. Sandra's throat tightened. "You don't know me, ma'am." Clara smiled wider. "No, but I know him. And he always breaks the toys he thinks he can fix. You're not even porcelain. You're temporary." Sandra froze, holding her breath. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice wouldn't come. Instead, she walked out quietly, her eyes burning, her chest heavy. Behind her, Clara's laughter echoed in the hallway. That night, when she tucked the twins into bed, Sandra looked around the mansion and felt the peace fading. The warmth that had begun to grow was being replaced again by cold air and silent stares. Something told her the storm was just beginning. The morning after Clara's visit, the mansion didn't feel the same. The soft peace that had filled it for weeks was gone. In its place came whispers, long glances, and sudden silence when Sandra entered a room. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her work. But no matter how hard she scrubbed the tables or folded the sheets, the air felt heavier every day. The laughter of her twins, once welcome, now seemed to make the other workers uncomfortable. One afternoon, while polishing the stair rails, she overheard two maids talking near the hallway. "I heard something went missing from Mr. Backwood's study," one said quietly. "Really?" the other whispered. "They say it was that silver watch his father gave him, and they're already checking everyone's lockers." Sandra froze, her hand still on the rail. She didn't even know what the watch looked like. Her stomach twisted as fear crept up her spine. She tried to focus on work, but her hands began to shake. By evening, she knew it wasn't just gossip. Mr. Harris, the estate manager, called her into the office. He didn't look her in the eyes. "Something's gone missing, Sandra," he said. "A family heirloom from Mr. Backwood's study." Her throat went dry. "I don't understand." He sighed, his fingers tapping the desk. "Given the situation, it's best if you take a few days off while we sort this out." Her knees weakened. "You think I took it?" He didn't answer, but his silence said everything. Sandra felt the world blur around her. Her locker had been opened earlier that day. She remembered the door bent slightly, her things scattered. Her one photo of David was torn at the edge. Now it all made sense. Someone had been in her locker. "I would never steal," she said softly. "I have children. I wouldn't risk their safety for anything." Mr. Harris cleared his throat. "It's just a precaution. You can return when the matter is resolved." But she knew what that meant. She was being pushed out. That night, she packed slowly. The mansion was quiet, except for the ticking of the grand hallway clock. She folded the twins' small clothes with trembling hands. Ethan clung to her leg, his voice small. "Mama, where we going?" "Home, baby," she whispered. "We're going home." Tears rolled down her face as she placed a note on the refrigerator. Her handwriting was neat, but her heart bled into every word. "And GT, I didn't take it, but I understand why no one believes me." She pinned it with a small magnet shaped like a star, Ethan's favorite. Then she carried her sleeping boys out the back door and down the quiet path that led to the service gate. The cold air hit her cheeks as she stepped outside. She didn't look back. When James Backwoods returned later that evening, the first thing he noticed was the silence. No soft giggles, no small footsteps, no voice humming in the kitchen. The mansion felt dead again. He walked to the kitchen and saw the note pinned to the fridge. He read it once, then again, each word cut deeper than the last. "And GT, I didn't take it, but I understand why no one believes me." He sank onto a chair, his hand trembling as he held the paper. The same silence he had once loved now pressed against his chest until it hurt to breathe. He had spent his life protecting his pride, his rules, his image, but what had it given him now? Nothing but an empty house and a hollow heart. He closed his eyes and remembered the sound of Ethan's laugh, the way Noah held his finger, the soft hum of Sandra's voice. He realized the truth he'd never said out loud. They had made the mansion feel like home. The next morning, he called for Mr. Harris. "Find the watch," James said sharply. Harris blinked, startled. "Sir?" I said, "Find it." "Now." Hours later, Harris returned holding something small and silver. He cleared his throat. "We found it, sir." It had slipped under the floor panel in the music room. One of the children must have dropped it while playing. James stared at the watch, cold metal gleaming in his palm. So that was it. No theft, no betrayal. Just innocence mistaken for crime. He clenched his jaw. "Get the car ready," he said quietly. The ride to Pinewood Apartments was long and silent. Rain fell in thin lines against the car window. When James reached the building, he climbed the narrow stairs and stopped at her door. He knocked softly. Sandra opened it a few moments later. Her eyes were tired. Noah rested against her chest, his face warm and red from fever. Ethan peeked out from behind her, holding his small toy truck. For the first time, James didn't know what to say. All the speeches he had prepared on the way there vanished. He held out the watch instead. "It was never gone," he said. The children dropped it. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head slowly. "That's not what hurts, Mr. Backwoods," she said quietly. "What hurts is that you believed I could do it." He swallowed hard, guilt heavy in his chest. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but there were no words good enough. So instead, he stepped inside quietly and knelt beside Noah, who whimpered from fever. "Let me," he said softly. He took a small bottle of water from his coat pocket, poured some into the cap, and touched it gently to the boy's lips. Noah sipped slowly, his breathing easing a little. James stayed there, crouched on the floor, his expensive suit forgotten, his eyes fixed on the small child resting in Sandra's arms. He didn't try to explain. He just stayed. For the first time in his life, his silence wasn't cold. It was his way of saying sorry. When Ethan and Noah finally fell asleep, Sandra carried them to bed and returned to find James still sitting on the floor, the silver watch lying on the table beside him. She crossed her arms, her voice quiet. "You could have just called." "I did," he said. "You didn't answer." She looked away. "Because I didn't want to hear excuses." He raised his head, his eyes full of something she hadn't seen before, Gret. "I don't have excuses," he said softly. "Just the truth. The house doesn't feel alive without you and the boys. It feels empty. And I don't want to live in empty anymore." Sandra turned away, blinking fast. She didn't speak, but inside her heart, something fragile began to stir, something she wasn't ready to name yet. A week passed after James Backwoods visited Pinewood Apartments. The mansion that once echoed with silence now sounded strange to him. The quiet wasn't peace anymore, it was emptiness. Every room felt colder, every wall too white. The laughter that had filled his mornings was gone. He sat at the kitchen table one evening, turning the silver pocket watch over in his hand. It ticked softly, but even that sound reminded him of Sandra's voice when she said, "What hurts is that you believed I could do it." Those words followed him everywhere. He wanted to make things right, not with promises, but with something real. The next morning, he drove back to Pinewood Apartments. Sandra opened the door again, surprised to see him. Her twins were on the floor, playing with blocks. James held a long paper tube under his arm. "I'm not here to talk," he said quietly. "I just want to show you something." He placed the tube on the table and unrolled it carefully. Sandra leaned closer. Blue lines covered the paper walls, windows, doors, and a wide room filled with drawings of toys, shelves, and stars. "What is this?" she asked. "A nursery wing," James replied. "At the mansion. Not just for your boys, for every worker who has children. They can bring them without fear of losing their jobs." Sandra looked at him, speechless. Her fingers touched the paper lightly. He continued, "I can't undo what I allowed to happen, but I can change the house. I can make it a place where laughter is allowed." For the first time in days, Sandra smiled faintly. She pointed at a small corner of the plan. "Ethan loves the moon. Can there be one on the ceiling?" James nodded, a real smile touching his face. "Then he'll have one, and stars that glow at night." Their hands brushed as he passed her the pen. Neither of them pulled away. It was quiet, but not awkward, just two hearts learning to trust again. Weeks turned into months. The mansion that had once been filled with silence now buzzed with the sound of saws, hammers, and voices. Workers painted the walls in soft colors: blue, yellow, cream. Carpenters built small beds and shelves. James was there every morning, watching closely, sometimes helping with his sleeves rolled up. Sandra visited often, helping choose fabrics and colors. She made sure the room felt warm, not like something from a magazine, but like a home. When the nursery wing was finally finished, James invited all the staff and their families for a small gathering. No photographers, no reporters, just them. The workers came with their children, some shy, some excited. Sandra stood near the entrance with Ethan and Noah, both holding her hands tightly. The doors opened, and the crowd gasped. The walls were painted in soft cream and pale blue. Shelves were lined with toys, picture books, and small teddy bears. A rocking chair stood near a wide window, and above them the ceiling glowed with tiny stars and one big painted moon. "Look, Mama!" Ethan shouted. The moon. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. James walked to the front, his voice calm but full. "You all have worked for me for years," he said. "Some of you feared to bring your children near this house because of my rules. I was wrong. A house without laughter is not a home. From today, this place belongs to all of Usand, to every child who brings it life." The staff clapped softly, some wiping their eyes. Sandra stood back, watching him speak. This wasn't the same man who once lived for order and silence. This was someone who had learned that love and compassion are worth more than pride. After the speech, James walked to her. "You didn't just clean my house, Sandra," he said quietly. "You reminded it how to live." "You reminded me how to live," she smiled, her voice gentle. Maybe we both needed a reminder. That evening, after everyone had gone, the mansion was quiet again, but a different kind of quiet. The air felt alive, warm. The twins were still running around, chasing each other through the new nursery, their laughter echoing softly. Sandra sat on a chair, watching them. James came in carrying 2 mugs of tea and set one beside her. "You must be tired," he said. "Good tired," she replied. "It's the kind that feels worth it." They sat side by side, not saying much. The moonlight from the big painted circle above cast a gentle glow across the room. Sandra looked at him, her voice low. "You really changed everything, Mr. Backwoods." He turned to her, a faint smile on his lips. "You did, Sandra. I just followed your lead." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to answer. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of what they both understood, but didn't rush to name. When Ethan finally yawned and Noah climbed into her lap, she stood to carry them toward the small beds. James stopped her gently. "You don't have to go," he said. "Not tonight. Not anymore." She froze, her heart still. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she nodded slightly, her eyes soft. The mansion that had once banned children was now filled with the quiet breathing of two sleeping boys. Sandra set them down, covered them with a small blanket, and turned back toward the man standing under the painted moon. He smiled, and she smiled back. No grand promises, no dramatic words, just peace, the kind that comes when broken people finally find home again. Dear viewers, sometimes it takes the smallest hands to open the hardest hearts. Sandra's courage and her twins' innocence turned a cold mansion into a real home and reminded us all that love is stronger than pride. If this story touched you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who still believes in kindness, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Before you go, comment below with these words: "Love can change." Let's see how many people still believe that's true.